Macros aren't about overcomplicating your diet. They're all about finally making sense of what's on your plate. When you understand how protein, carbs, fats actually work for you, fat loss becomes simple and sustainable. Welcome back to Driven for Health. I'm Coach Brian Prana, and today we're diving into the second installment of our breakdown of the nutrition pyramid for muscle and strength. We're going to be building off the framework here. Before we get into that, I just wanted to read an excerpt from Jay. He was one of the stories I talked about last episode. The sales guy that lost 22 pounds going to Vegas, well, this is what he had to say. This is Jay. Before I started working with Coach Brian and the Call to Rise program, I dreaded walking into those big sales meetings. I remember being in Vegas, pitching a huge company I wanted as a client. And all I could think about was how out of shape I looked in my suit. Like, no shape at all. Round, actually. I didn't feel confident, and it showed. After working with Coach Brian, I dropped those 22 pounds, and now my suit fits. I got my energy back, and the next time I stepped into the same kind of room, I owned it. I stood tall. I wasn't just confident in my pitch. I was confident in myself. Now, thanks, Jay, for that. Those are the type of stories and the impact that I love having. And that's why I do these episodes of these podcasts and everything that I do on the social media posting and all to help influence, encourage, and guide men to be their best and live. So let's jump back into our conversation today. If you remember from the last episode, I introduced the nutrition pyramid and why it's such a valuable framework. The big idea was this. Too often we focus on the wrong details first. Men stress over supplement stacks and timing, like what amino acids they should be doing, carnitine, how much should I be eating to boost my muscles, and all those type of things. And whether they should cut out egg whites or egg yolks or eggs at all, or what the perfect post-workout shake looks like. But they don't even know how many calories they're eating. It's like they flipped the pyramid upside down. At the top of the pyramid is supplements, and it's small. And so they flip it upside down, and they are trying to balance everything off of that small point. It doesn't work. That's like putting the cart before the horse. We talked about this. If you're missing that big picture, the small stuff won't matter. Calories are the most important. So this nutrition pyramid lays out the nutrition you need in order of importance. And at the base is calories, energy balance. That's what's most important. If you didn't listen to episode 5, pause this and go back to listen to calories and how to manage a calorie maintenance, calorie surplus, calorie deficit on your needs. But this episode is about macronutrient composition. Then comes micronutrients, meal timing, and supplements at the very top. They all matter, but they're not all equal. Last time we talked to the foundations, meaning calories in, calories out, and managing your rate of weight change. Today we're stepping into one level to talk about macronutrients. So we go up one level to the second rung, protein, carbs, fats. How do we set them up depending on what your goals are? What ranges are they, and how do they work best for you? Now, before I break down the numbers, let me pause for a second. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to guys like David, say a 46-year-old executive who used to be a college athlete, and he told me he hadn't felt athletic in a decade. Between raising his kids, climbing the corporate ladder, long commutes into the city, his workouts literally just disappeared. And so did his waistline. It grew, and his abs that he once had. When he finally tried to get back into it, he jumped into dieting by slashing carbs, skipping meals, and overdoing cardio. He dropped weight fast, but he also lost some muscle and he really was exhausted, tired. That's exactly why calories, protein, training all matter to be in alignment. When you're cutting fat, we want to lose fat, a fat phase, not we want to lose fat in a fat loss phase, not weight, and potentially losing more muscle. If you get calories wrong and you cut protein too low, you're going to end up like David, lighter on the scale, but weaker and smaller and still frustrated. You just don't like it. You just don't look and feel the way you do. Sure, your clothes might feel better, but when you take them off, you know what I mean? You stare in the mirror and you just don't see that definition that you once had in your younger body. So let's get it right. Let's dive in. Why macros matter. Once you figured out how many calories you should be eating for your goal, I'll tell you, most guys that I ever work with are around 16 to 1800 calories in that range. Maintenance is about 2000 and potential gain is 2200 to 2500. Now, if they're larger people, say 300, then we can shift that weight range. Maybe it shifts up 200 to 300 calories and it's more like 1800 to 2100 calories to lose weight, 25 to 2800 as maintenance, and to put on more weight over 3000. But if you're 300, you do not want to be eating that. And those are just general ranges that you want to start with, but you have to trial and error that to make sure that the scale goes down. And of course, walking 10K, getting 2 or 3 strength training. We will talk more about strength training and workouts that way in the upcoming episodes. Now, whether it's fat loss, maintenance, or muscle gain, the next step is deciding where those calories should come from. And here's the quick breakdown. This is basic nutrition 101. Protein and carbs are 4 calories per gram. Fat is 9 calories per gram. Fat is over twice as calorie dense as the others. So I say, when coaching people, fat multiplies the calories, protein and carbs add them, and this is why. Now, alcohol also has calories. Generally, it's 7 calories, but we're not going to talk too much about that since it doesn't necessarily contribute to body composition in a positive way. Having a drink here and there isn't too big of a deal. We will break down alcohol on a future episode for sure, talk about how to manage it, but not right now. There are 2 main ways men usually calculate macros: grams per pound of body weight or percentages of your total calories. Now, each has pros and cons. Grams per pound respect your body size, but they don't necessarily account for how many calories you actually have to work with. On the other hand, percentages account for your total calorie budget, but don't account for individual body structure or lean mass. That's why I like to use a hybrid approach. Protein is based on your body weight because it's structural. It's there, builds hairs, keeps you strong. And we're looking for your muscle mass to be, or lean body mass for most men is going to be, if you're smaller size, 140 pounds of lean muscle mass, or body mass, all the way up to 170, 180. If you're larger, you might be able to get over 200. The average male is going to be around, say, 150, 160, depending on their fitness history, their strength training routines in the past. All those things do add up. Now, just going off of this, I'll say this a lot of times, you're going to end up falling around 140 to 180 grams of protein, roughly, maybe a little bit more, but it also has to blend into the lifestyle as well. So we'll dive into that a little bit more. Carbs and fats are set as percentages of total calories because they're primarily energy sources. Macronutrients, when you're dieting to lose weight, well, let's start there with fat loss. When you're dieting, you're in a calorie deficit. That means something has to give. You can't maximize protein, carbs, and fats all the time at the same time. you have to prioritize which one should go higher and which one should go lower. The main risk when dieting is losing muscle mass and slowing down your metabolism. I will repeat that one more time. Write it down, pause this. The main risk when dieting is losing muscle mass and slowing down your metabolism. You do not want to do that. To minimize that in the fat loss process, you have to have protein intake higher. Okay? The recommended range, generally 1 gram per pound of body weight. But if you are, say, 300 pounds, that's not going to exist, or that's not going to be a good idea, right? You literally just eat protein and that would be it. And you probably wouldn't like it. And you don't need that much protein a day to manage keeping muscle mass on your body. Now, you could go off the lean muscle mass of 1 gram per pound or 1.4 grams per pound in that range of your lean body mass. And you could get a body fat scale of measurements, a bod pod, DEXA, InBody, the Amazon ones that measure body fat, Hume. There's so many different ones. I used to actually own a bod pod back in my CrossFit days. And I ranged, the lowest I ever got was about 10%. And I usually would hang out 10, 12% body fat. In my youth, maybe I'm a little bit more now, but I'm also juggling 4 kids and a business and content production like this for you guys. And I squeeze my workouts in and I manage my diet to maintain, I'm 6 foot, about 185, 190, and I've been there for decades. In fact, I'm usually, just throwing this out there, usually working out 12 to 15 workouts in a month. That's pretty good. That's going to be really consistent, and I rarely hit 10K days as steps. So I'm active, healthy, I'm capable, functional, all those things. If I want to run 5K, cool, I'll go do it. If I want to lift some weights, cool. Nobody cares about how much I deadlift, so it's irrelevant. I just don't want to get hurt. And you should abide by that type of process as well. Now, where you fall depends on factors like training, your age, your body composition, and fat intake usually drops a little lower while dieting, somewhere between 15 and 25% of your total calories is there. That'll still give you enough to maintain healthy hormones and basic functioning, but it leaves more room for carbs, which are important in fueling your workouts to burn body fat and keep you full, because you can eat a lot of fibrous carbs, vegetables, some fruit that are very filling, whereas fat isn't. Okay, so we can just do a little quick side note here. A tablespoon of oil, olive oil, avocado, sesame, any oil, is about 120 calories. A tablespoon of peanut butter is about 100 calories, 90 to 100. A tab of butter is, typical tab, about 100 calories. That's not a lot. Rice, a cup of rice is about 200. A cup of beans is about 220. Okay. Now we have things like an apple is about 100 calories. Banana, pear, orange, things like that are about 100 calories roughly, depending on size. Then you have the fibrous carbs. A whole tomato is maybe 40 calories. An onion, 40 calories. A cucumber, 40, 50 calories. Broccoli, a cup of broccoli is about 30. You can have a lot more. So let's think about this. You get almost 4 cups. You get about 4 cups of broccoli for 1 tablespoon of olive oil in terms of calories. That's why we're going to have lower fat and higher carbs and fibrous carbs in this process of cutting fat. Now, back to this. We also say fat. We're just touching base on fat. Fat is generally about hormones and keeping you healthy there. I usually, as far as a number, I don't like to go under 50 grams with my guys. I think that's a reasonable low fat. If you were dieting or stage competition or whatever, then you could go a little bit lower. But that would be on your own accord and maybe with a coach for a very structured routine and process. But I don't think the average person needs to do it. And even more specifically, anyone that I'm ever working with doesn't need to do that either. Now, after we get those, say, 15 to 25% of your calories, the rest goes toward your carbohydrates. What that means is we have about somewhere between like 30-ish percent of your calories coming from protein, 25 to 30-ish coming from fat, and about 45 coming percentage-wise coming from carbs. That's a reasonably balanced meal that's going to work really well. And I've been using that protocol for decades now, and it's proven. I've had thousands of clients at this point in my career. Now, carbs aren't technically essential, but they still help support performance, energy, motivation. If you have low carbs, you won't be motivated to move. If you cut calories out very low, as we talked about, you will not move much. Your subconscious will kick in and your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, will just slow down. You drop something on the ground, you look at it, you're like, yeah, I'll pick that up tomorrow. Even if it's a pencil, yeah, I'll just leave that there. Now, training is the number one factor that helps you maintain lean body mass in a fat loss phase by lifting weights and doing muscle building activities, some form of strength training. And if you, again, cut those carbs too low, training suffers, and so does your opportunity and abilities to maintain muscle mass. So to recap, dieting, your macros, protein about 1 to 1.4 grams per pound of body weight, or we can again say basically, guys, about 140 to 180-ish grams in a fat loss phase makes a lot of sense depending on your size or shape, your muscle mass, your training, or fat loss goals and how long you need to actually be in a dieting phase. Yeah, we'll talk about dieting phases and maintenance phases and different things throughout a process. If you have to lose over 50 pounds, it may be in your best metabolically healthiest state to do that in a 2 or 3 phases. You lose weight, you maintain for 2 or 3 weeks, you lose weight to keep your metabolism healthy. So we'll talk more about that later. All right, going back to this. So protein was in that range. Fat's about 15 to 25% of your total calories, possibly 30 if you are having a hard time keeping your fat low. And the rest comes from carbs. This is a super easy way to do this. And this reminds me of the one time I was working with Ralph. We were going through macro and calorie calculations. He kept asking me all these questions. They were great questions. And, Ralph, he's a father of 3 kids that were, one was in the 20s, one in high school, one in middle school. So big range there. But he had the classic dad bod from trying to provide for those kids. And every January he'd go on those all out cutting carb type programs, nothing, and jogging every morning. And he'd lose 20 pounds real quick. But by the summer, he was back where he started. Why? Because his training, his nutrition, his approach of just cutting out carbs with kids is crazy, in my opinion. I have 4 kids. Carbs are in every dinner, that's for sure. But he wasn't supporting muscle either. He's just running and cutting calories out, especially carbs. And his macros weren't set up properly. So we shifted them to a proper macro balance, say a 40-30-30 or 35-35-30 in terms of carbs, proteins, then fat, if you heard me correctly. So the 25 or 30% around fat and the others 30, 35, 40, the protein and carbs. So when we shifted this, a higher protein, enough carbs to fuel his lifting and his training, and then a sustainable amount of fat, because if you track your macros long enough, you know that fat multiplies. It just shows up. It's always and forever. So he actually lost fat and was actually built some muscle back in that time frame. I mean, this was over more than just the Call to Rise program, but he worked into the Vanguard, which is the after program, and continued support and accountability. And so for the first time in years, he actually felt like he wasn't dieting to just shrinking his body. He was actually fueling fat loss from the inside out. And the takeaway there, and why I share these stories throughout our episodes, is that if you can hear it from someone else in their experience, then you can feel it in your body as well. And that's the power of understanding calories and macros and this whole nutrition pyramid that we're doing. Now, a quick cutout from our moment from our sponsors. This episode, again, is brought to you by The Call to Rise, a 100-day fat loss challenge for men over 40. If you're a busy professional, a husband, a dad, even just a man, and your energy slide, your confidence is just non-existent, you're running around with your head cut off with all the responsibilities, your body just doesn't look the way you want it to, this could be the thing that really sets you back on track. It's 100 days. The goal is to drop at least 20 plus pounds, build some strength and confidence, and actually master nutrition. There's such a heavy focus on nutrition. It's not just about the scale or hitting the gym, but it's really about leading from the front, leading yourself. So when you wake up and you stare in the mirror, you're happy and excited about what you see. And then that sets the rest of the day's tone to show confident. So stop waiting, join the brotherhood, like-minded man, get coached and supported. Go to thecalltorise.com and start today. Going back into our conversation, macronutrients when gaining. Now, what about gaining? Not belly fat. We want muscle, okay? So if you are, say, let's stage this. If you're overweight, you need to be in a fat loss phase first. Get the fat off your body, then you can build muscle the rest of your life. I can't stress that enough. Don't try and do both at the same time. It literally just takes longer. Recompositions is a month-long game that you play, not just a couple weeks, okay? You can be in a fat loss phase, lose 1, 2, 3 pounds a week, get the fat off, get to that goal body, and build up from there. And use strength training not to burn calories, but to build muscle. That's the best way to go about it. Now, back to gaining muscle. When you are in a calorie surplus, remember we talked last time. Again, if you didn't listen to episode 5, check it out. We talked about calorie ranges and even earlier. But we need to be about 100 to possibly 300 calories in a surplus. And if you have more calories, then you don't necessarily need as much protein because your body isn't in a what we call a catabolic state, a state of eating your muscle mass and pulling away, because when you're in a calorie deficit, you don't have enough fuel and your body's pulling it off your body. Ideally, body fat, not muscle or stored muscle glycogen, which is carbs that you eat, put in your muscles, or water, or fueling growth. And that's what is most important here, all right? Now, protein can be a little bit lower. If you are already lost the weight, then this will be a good thing for us to manage, make sure that it works best for you to stay focused and centered on what you need to do in this process here. So protein can actually be a little bit lower, 0.8 grams to 1.2 grams of body weight. Yes, we want plenty of good, healthy, lean protein source, but you can have a little more wiggle room with the amount of protein that you are doing here. Even if with a less than a gram a pound of protein can work, and despite what hardcore lifters and bodybuilders will tell you, okay, I assure you, you will be okay. All right? That's really important to understand and note. Fat intake can actually go higher in this phase. So can carbohydrates. Again, carbohydrates are the rest. So fat can be 20 to 30% of your total calories, and the rest goes into carbohydrates, which provide, again, the energy to train harder and break your muscles down to ultimately rebuild them. Here's another example to walk through and break down. Let's go through this. Say that go off the 200-pound male, and we'll use a calorie surplus of 3,200 calories for lean gaining. Protein is a gram per pound, 200 grams of protein, that's 800 calories. Fat's 25% of the calories, it's about 90 grams of fat, around 800, and carbs end up being the rest, and that's roughly about 400 carbs. It's a lot, it's 1,600 calories. That adds up to roughly 3,200 calories. perfect for a lean gain phase for this gentleman. All right. That will most of the times say that in a fat loss phase, we're going to have more protein be about 140 to 170. Fat's going to be 50 to 60. Carbs are going to be roughly, ideally 150, 200 calories or grams, based on your activity levels, calorie goals, and all that stuff. All right. But in this example here, you can rewind it, but that's what we're looking for. About 200 grams of protein, 90 grams of fat, and 400 carbs to build some muscle. Let's take that same guy and put him into a cut. So again, just using this same example, I just gave some general ranges that most men fall into that I ever work with. And we'll drop him to about 2,500 calories per day to create a deficit from 3,200 calories. Protein gets bumped up slightly back to 1.1 to 1.2 grams per pound. That's about 225 grams. 900 calories, about 20% of the calories are, say, 55 grams of fat, and carbs, the remainder, about 275 grams, which would be 1,100 calories. That way, he'll get plenty of protein to protect his muscles, even enough fat for hormonal function, and enough carbs to keep the training strong and actually showing up there. Fiber. We want to talk about fiber. That is a subcategory of carbohydrates, just like sugar would be a subcategory of carbohydrates. So this is one piece that people always overlook. And no, we don't want to get fiber from all these keto products or these overinflated. This wrap has 15 grams of fiber. Great, I'm going to have 2 of those and call it a day. Let's not do that. A normal amount of fiber comes in 2 to 3 grams per serving or cup for most things to get, say, 30 grams, which is what I love to encourage guys to do, at least 25, but 30 to encourage higher volumes of lower calorie foods like vegetables and things that are, I like fibrous carbs of vegetables being 50 calories or less per cup is an easy way to frame that. So guys, takeaway here, 25 grams per day, and that will certainly help with digestion and help with fullness. And we don't have to go crazy here and exceed, say, 20% of your total carb intake from fiber, since that will just end up potentially causing some digestive issues. Nobody wants excessive gas or bloating or anything like that. If you're eating lower carb or keto, good rule of thumb is around 10 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories, 10, 12, right in that is pretty simple. Now, some of the key takeaways that you want to pull from our conversation today is once you know your calorie target, your next step is setting protein, carbs, and fats. Protein is based on body weight. Dieting is in that dieting phase or cutting phase, about 1 to 1.4 grams per pound of body weight, or again, we go off of lean body mass for most guys. And again, I'll just say it, it's going to be about 140 to 170 grams of protein. If you're gaining, you can ultimately just keep it around, say, 175-ish or 150-ish, depending on your size. If you're a bigger guy, then the example above that we just shared, the 200-pounder, having a range of 225 to, say, 180 grams of protein makes sense and a gain phase. That is set as a percentage in a cut or dieting fat loss phase, 15 to 25%, and gaining is 20 to 30% of calories. Carbs fill in the rest, supporting performance and recovery. Fiber matters, 20 to 25. So those are some key takeaways. You don't have to go over 40 for the love. You don't want any challenges there. Now, these guidelines will work well and for about 80 to 90% with this 40 plus age range group. And of course, individual differences may vary. They always come into play. And this just gives us a really solid starting point for you. Coming up in the next episode, we'll be diving into the next level up, the third tier of the pyramid, and talking about micronutrients. Vitamins, minerals, how they fit into the big picture. And ultimately, until then, remember this: nutrition isn't chasing magical numbers or cutting out entire food groups. For the love, please don't do that. That was the 1980s and 90s. Update your software when it comes to nutrition. It's about creating a system that supports your training, that supports your goals, that supports your daily lifestyle and your long-term health. That's what I've been doing and telling for my whole career. All right, let's transition into the Fast Five. These are 5 questions that I like to ask that can be related to the podcast episode or the topics or just things, get to know me a little bit better or other things that I come across. So today we're still going to talk about nutrition and food a bit more. Question number 1 is meal prep. When it comes to meal prep, are you the type who goes all in on Sunday? More of a grab and go improviser, or you just wing it day to day? Well, me personally, I think the person who DM'd me this and asked me, but I'm a wing it person. I tracked for 4 years. I have a really good understanding of what portions, timing of food. I literally talk about this every single day for hours. It's embedded into my subconscious, so I just do. And I can go into the fridge and look and see whatever it is that I want, I can grab and go, and off I go to eat a reasonable portion meal with a balance of protein, vegetables, fruit, stretchy carbs, a little bit of healthy fat to have an average sized meal that will give me about 4-ish hours of time without getting hungry. And that's the magic. Now, number 2, eating out. When you're eating out, Brian, and trying to stay on track, do you usually scan the menu for protein first, just guess the calories, or throw caution to the wind and enjoy? Well, when you have 4 kids and eating out costs over $100 whenever you do it, I eat what I'm going to enjoy, okay? Because I want it to be sweet. I can have a salad at home. I don't need to pay $20 for a salad. I need to enjoy something different that I wouldn't eat at home. And the idea for anyone I ever work with is that eat clean and healthy and however you want to describe it when it's easiest at home. And that really sets you up for long-term success. So we don't have to really struggle eating out. All right, question number 3, reading labels, nutrition labels. When you check out the nutrition label, what do you really look at first? Calories, protein, or the ingredients? I'm looking at calories and portion for those calories. So I understand the context of how much of this can I eat for these many calories. Then I look for protein and fat ratio. I want protein to be 3 to 5 times more protein than the fat if it is a protein source. If it's not, then that's not as relevant. And then I could look at the ingredients, but I'm going to avoid a lot of highly processed foods most of the time. Moderation, please. All right, number 4 is carbs. If someone says carbs are bad, how do you react? Do you just roll your eyes, avoid bread, or wonder if they even lift? Well, carbs are bad. That, I think, again, is stuck in the 80s or 90s. If someone says, I just cut out carbs to lose weight, well, I think you're stuck in the 90s with your dieting protocol. You can eat carbs, you can eat bread. It's not a big deal. You just can't eat too much. Snacking. Question 5. Mid-afternoon hunger hits. What's your go-to snack? Something protein-rich, a sweet treat, or whatever's around? Well, again, whatever's around, but oftentimes I work at home. I'm just eating leftovers from the night before. Having some protein, vegetables, search carbs, because I know that I usually eat around 11, 3, 6, 10 p.m., those different time frames, and I know that food's coming. I don't need to overeat. Well, there's the Fast 5 wrapping up. And then, all right, let's wrap up today's episode for Driven for Health. And remember, nutrition doesn't have to be complicated. Whether it's meal prep, eating out, or just understanding a label, it all comes down to making small, consistent choices that add up over time. If you got value from today's episode, share with a friend who needs to hear this. You can leave me a positive review. And message me in the DMs if you have other questions or topics you'd like to cover. And again, don't forget to check out episode number 2, where I dive deeper into how much fat and how much fat loss you can have in an actual week. Okay. All these things stack into actually you losing as much fat in a healthy way for you. So that's episode number 2. Now, once you understand that pacing, then in your weight loss journey, then everything starts to make a lot of sense. Until next time, building more on the nutritional pyramid, keep leading yourself in your health, keep showing up in your workouts, pick healthier food options, and keep rising to the healthiest version of yourself.